What I want to do today is I just want to touch on 3 bits of research that we've been doing in our GRDC funded projects that are looking at how we deal with herbicide resistant weed issues. So to start with, one of the things that we do across the southern region is go out and survey farmers' paddocks to see who's got herbicide resistance. We actually don't want to identify anybody with herbicide resistance. We want to know what's out in the district. And this is a table of all the surveys that have been conducted, all the areas that have been surveyed in the last few years. The one you guys will be interested in is this one down here. That's a survey that John Broster of the E.H. Graham Centre did in 2008 throughout southeastern New South Wales, and it will be no surprise to you consultants that what John discovered was that almost everybody has got FOP-resistant ryegrass, and almost everybody has got sulphonide urea-resistant ryegrass. And in fact, almost everybody's got both of those. When we start looking at some of the other herbicides, there's a bit less resistance. Select is still working for most guys, but 20% of properties with resistance to Select, it's only going to go one direction, and that's going to make life difficult. And fortunately in New South Wales, Trifluralin's still working. So of you consultants out there, how many of you have got clients that are using Trifluralin? Put your hands up. Who's got clients that use Trifluralin? Now come and be honest. Who's got clients that use Trifluralin most years, in most crops? A few? Oh, I reckon it's worse than that. Okay, I want to tell you guys need to listen. The rest of you can sort of ignore the next little bit. But those guys who have got clients that are using a lot of Trifluralin, you need to listen to this because I'm going to tell you where you and your clients are going over the next few years. In the mid-north of South Australia, we can go out and 1 in every 2 paddocks we can find Trifluralin resistant ryegrass in it. 1 in every 2 paddocks, regardless of crop that's used, regardless of how long they've been in cropping. If we go to the Yorke Peninsula, it's 8 out of 10 paddocks have got Trifluralin resistant ryegrass in it. So these guys have got FOP resistance, they've got DIM resistance, and they've got Trifluralin resistance. Okay, so if you've got growers using a lot of Trifluralin, that's where they're headed. So a few years ago, recognising that this was a major problem, we thought we better try and do something about it. And so the real challenge came to be in a no-till farming system where you have no post-emergent herbicides that work in wheat, your only pre-emergent herbicide that you can use in wheat's not working, where do you go? There aren't too many places to go. So we went searching through the chemical cabinets of all the herbicide companies to see what they were thinking about bringing in, what they brought in and dumped and hadn't been used, and what they were using in other sectors but never bothered to bring to grains, to see what might be out there. And so how many post-emergent herbicides that might work on ryegrass do you think we found? Anyone like to take a guess? 0. Not a single one. There is not, as far as we know, there is not a single post-emergent herbicide that might work on ryegrass that could be used safely in wheat in development. They will work on our ryegrass. I should clarify that. I know at least 4 new sulphonide urea herbicides coming forward, but they're not going to work on our ryegrass. So what we did was we ended up looking at pre-emergent chemistry. So we spent a number of years looking at what pre-emergent chemistry is out there, working with the companies about what might come forward. And you've already started to see the fruits of this. Box of Gold came out a couple of years ago. A number of you probably tried Box of Gold to see how it works. So rather than tell you a lot about all of this new chemistry and how it works, my opinions about it are in the notes. So you can read those at your leisure. What I want to do is just touch on a few of the issues that have turned up with some of this chemistry. Some of the things that you perhaps need to know a little bit about in order to get the best out of it. So one of the first things that we did determine was a lot of this new chemistry actually works on Trifluralin resistant ryegrass. You know, that was something that we had to find out if we were going to go forward with it. So this is a trial that we conducted a few years ago on a population of ryegrass that was resistant to Trifluralin, and we know it's resistant to Trifluralin because we put 3 litres of Triflurex over it and got 60% control. Okay, so control was inadequate even at the top rate. But when we started looking at some of this new chemistry, it was getting really good levels of control. So there's Box of Gold there. Outlook, we should see Outlook next year. It won't be able to be used in cereals, but it'll be certainly there for the pulse crops. Sakura that Steve's talked about briefly. And in this circumstance, because this ryegrass was not terribly resistant to trifluralin, this little mixture, Trifluralin plus Avedex, worked reasonably well. However, it's not always going to be like that. So you probably heard a fair bit about, oh, look, you know, Trifluralin plus Avedex does as good a job on resistant ryegrass as Box of Gold and this new chemistry. It's not always like that. This is another trial that we had run in Victoria. Again, it's a highly resistant, well, this is actually a really highly resistant population of ryegrass. 2 litres of Trifluralin gave us 10% control. Okay, so very resistant. Here, the Box of Gold plus Trifluralin treatment just wasn't adequate when you only had the low rate of Box of Gold in there. Here's Trifluralin plus Avedex again, just not adequate. Because that trifluralin, it's so resistant to that trifluralin, the extra herbicide's not helping. So if you're getting into thinking about, well, how am I going to go forward? I've just told you you're all going to get growers with trifluralin-resistant ryegrass. How do I go forward with this? I think you've got to make some hard decisions about some of this, and it's not necessarily a case of saying, oh, well, let's just move on to Trifluralin plus Avedex. That's just going to be keeping the wolf from the door for a year or so while your ryegrass gets really resistant. So you probably want to be thinking about, as this new chemistry comes in, you know, how can that fit into the system? Where's a good place to start and play with it? Work out how to work it into your system. Some other things we found out about the chemistry is that it's different. It works differently. This is a trial we did with a Hart field site group where we looked at what actually happened with ryegrass numbers, because one of the big problems we've had with guys in 9 points and press wheels using trifluralin, it's great between the rows, but you'll get all of this ryegrass in the row. And if we look and we count percent control in the row for trifluralin, okay, about 15%, it's getting up respectable in between the rows. This new chemistry that we've been looking at, so here's Sakura, here's Box of Gold. One of the things you're starting to notice, you're actually getting a lot more control of ryegrass in the row with some of this new chemistry. And you're doing that because it's water soluble. It's much more water soluble than trifluralin. So one of the things you'll find as you move over to these new chemistries, it works a bit differently. And that's got some upsides, ryegrass control in the row, and it's going to have some downsides. And certainly this is one of the downsides. This is some trials we've been running. That's Box of Gold in wheat. And you might notice that if we actually look at this row down here, that we actually don't have a lot of wheat left. What happened in that row is we put all the stubble down into the crop seeder row. So this was done with this, and we actually managed to hairpin all that stubble down into the crop seeder row. And what happens is rain, soluble herbicide, it doesn't stick to stubble like trifluralin does, came straight off, right there with the wheat seed, none of the wheat came up. So one of the things to be careful of with some of this new chemistry, it's water soluble. You do need to be able to separate it from the crop seed where the crop is very susceptible. Interestingly, we spent 5 years working on all this chemistry, and they were 5 years which tended to have dry springs. And I'll tell you what, dry springs make pre-emergent herbicide chemistry work really well. You get really fabulous results. Last year was a very, very different kettle of fish. We had an extended growing season, and one of the things that we were able then to work out is which one of these herbicides really worked well in an extended season like that, and which ones were going to fall away a bit. And we actually knew that Box of Gold had shorter persistence than all the other herbicides, so we're really expecting to see something, and we did. So this is the blue bars are July, the orange bars are August, so early July, late August counts. And if we look across, we can see that this population is a bit resistant to trifluralin, that's why it didn't work all that well. This is a high rate of Avedex. It can be a bit hit and miss with ryegrass, but it sometimes works really well. That was a bit down there. Here's Sakura, that worked well, pretty well in both. These two here, Outlook and Box of Gold, you saw how they fall away in control in August? That's late germinators. Herbicides run out, late germinators come up. So what are you going to do if you're going to look at using box of gold, because it's the only one you can use this year? You've got big ryegrass populations you're looking at. Even after you've done the double knot, you're still going to have big ryegrass populations there, because the ryegrass had a lot of seed this year, and that seed's all going to be dormant. So how are you going to play that with in a situation where you've got big ryegrass populations, you're going to use pre-emergent chemistry, thinking about using box of gold, you know it's going to run out. Where do you go? Well, there are some things you can do. Okay, it's not a case of saying, oh, we've got a big year, we've just got to go back to Trifluralin. Because what we found more than anything else is that these sorts of mixtures here have, year in, year out, provided us with really good ryegrass control, and in an extended season like we had last year, at the end of August, we're still looking at over 85% ryegrass control from pre-emergent herbicides only. The only controlled pre-emergent herbicides in there. We've gone all the way to the end of August, lots of rainfall, and we've still got over 85% control. And it's because of the way these particular products work. Avidex is tending to work largely on the shoots as they come through. The other herbicides are all tending to work from the roots. So you sort of get two goes at the ryegrass if you've got a mixture like that. And I think that in longer rainfall areas where you struggle with pre-emergence, certainly in the higher yielding areas where you can of course afford the cost, this is probably not going to be a bad strategy going forward, as this sort of box of gold plus Avidex, Trifluralin plus Avidex, or even when Sakura comes out, mixing it with Avidex. We've always found that they've been the best treatments in every trial we've conducted. Okay, that's enough for pre-emergent herbicides. I'm going to be on the panel later with Greg about pre-emergent herbicides, so we can have some more discussion there. The other thing that we've been looking at a lot has been glyphosate resistance. I talk about this every time I come to New South Wales. And this is my current list of where all the glyphosate resistance in ryegrass is in Australia. And a fair bit in winter grains and so on, but these are the ones that really are concerning me, particularly this one. It's all those sort of uncropped areas around the farm. That seems to be where a lot of glyphosate-resistant ryegrass is turning up. Partly because nobody takes too much notice of them. You go out and put glyphosate out, you don't do anything else, and there's no competition. So if there are any survivors, they set a lot of seed. No competition, you get a lot of seed. Builds up seed banks, you end up with big weed problems, and they become glyphosate resistant. And seeing as how my campaign to get everybody to pull their fences out and crop over them hasn't worked, people still want to have fences because they have those things called sheep, I think we've got to find some other solutions. We certainly know that putting a competitive crop over glyphosate-resistant ryegrass is a good way of managing it. It runs the numbers down pretty quickly. But if you can't do that, what are you going to do? There are other options. There's mowing and slashing and all those sorts of options, which shouldn't be dismissed. But we understand that some guys are going to want to use herbicides. So what are you going to do when you're faced with glyphosate-resistant ryegrass on a fence line? So we've been spending a couple of years running trials. We've gone out to some pretty ugly fence lines and run some trials out there to ask the question, what are the options? What options do you have? And today, I'm just going to show you some data from our trial from last year, showing how some of these options do work. Now, they're not all these options are very palatable. We are looking at a bunch of other things that are not on this slide, but that's all unregistered, so I can't talk about it. So this is our trial. These are our ryegrass seed heads at the end of the year, per square metre. You notice those numbers there? 4,000 seed heads per square metre. How much ryegrass seed is that going to be? Okay, this is a long season environment, high rainfall, no competition. Of course, we're going to get a lot of ryegrass seed. So they're big populations. That's a litre of Powermax. That's 2 litres of Powermax. They haven't done very much. Even when you start mixing Powermax with residual chemistry, which gives us our biggest effect with Powermax, we're doing a bit of okay, but we've still got 1,500 ryegrass seed heads per metre square. That looks a lot better, but it's not where we want to be. So under these circumstances, with big ryegrass populations, that are very resistant to glyphosate. Residual chemistry alone is not going to do the job for you. And different residual chemistry does different things. Simazine has got no knockdown effect, really. So that's why simazine didn't do as well as some of these others. Here's spray seed, 3.2 litres of spray seed. You know, if you go and put that out on a thick ryegrass population, it's not going to be fabulous, and it's not. This has been our best treatment 2 years, one of our best treatments 2 years running. Spray seed plus diaron, nice little mixture, and it really has cleaned up the ryegrass. Spray seed plus simazine wasn't any good. Alliance was okay, much better last year, but it was okay this year. Certainly you can get too big a population for Alliance to work. Oh, and this is 2 lots of spray seed, going out twice with spray seed, so that works. As I say, we're working on some other treatments because we want to have something that's not spray seed, because not everybody wants to apply spray seed to their fence lines, because not everybody's set up to do that properly. So we do have to find some other solutions, and we certainly have some interesting leads in our collection of treatments, and we're talking to the companies about that, and hopefully one of them might be moved into getting a registration for one of these mixtures, but we'll see how that goes. But certainly at the moment, there are some things that can be done in that space. If the populations aren't big, just adding a residual chemistry to the glyphosate will work. Need to be careful about things like trees. Okay, if you don't want to take the trees out from around the fence line, maybe 6 litres of diaron is not the product to be using. You might want to use the Amatrol instead. Okay, so pick and choose based on the circumstance. Oh, just some photos to show you what it's like. So this is our control. It's our ryegrass control on the fence line. That's 2 litres of Powermax. That's taken about 6 weeks after the Powermax went out. And you couldn't tell. There's Powermax plus diaron. You can see it's thinned it out a lot, but there's still a lot of ryegrass there. Spray seed, here's Alliance. Worked pretty well, but it's left a bit behind. And this is spray seed plus diaron. There's only really a sort of small amount of ryegrass coming through that. So even in these really heavy, thick populations, you can actually do a job on them if you choose the right product. Topic that might be of interest to some of you is windmill grass. Who's got growers out here who've got a problem with windmill grass in their summer fallows? Yeah, I thought there'd be some. This is some work. We got some samples sent to us of windmill grass suspected of being glyphosate resistant. So this is our first trial on them. This is the control. That's our suspected resistant one at the back. This is the susceptible one at the front. That's the control. That's 1 litre of the glyphosate product. Glyphosate's not real good on windmill grass. You've got to keep the rates up to really control it when it's susceptible. That's 2 litres. That's 4 litres. So at 4 litres we've got fabulous control. 8 litres there. But this one, that's 2 litres. It's still greening 4 litres. And there's still one hanging on there in 8 litres. So even though it's not that well controlled by glyphosate, you still get glyphosate resistance in it. And that's just to show you the dose response, just to show you it's different. So this is the touchdown. 1 litre there, 2 litres there, 4 litres here. You still see we're getting about 25% of them are surviving through 4 litres, and the odd one will come through 8 litres. So that's just something else to, I think, worry about in that fallow system. I don't have a solution. I'm sorry, I don't have a solution for windmill grass, but we're working on it. We're hoping to perhaps come up with something that you can do. Oh, cultivation works, but not everybody wants to do that. Last thing I want to briefly touch on is paraquat resistant ryegrass. Now this won't affect most of you because this has come out of irrigated cropping. But this is some samples that were sent to us. We've got 3 populations come from irrigated crops in South Australia. All have had a long history of paraquat use. So Steve said that if you go paraquat, 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 you're going to get paraquat resistance. That's what these guys did, okay? It just goes to show that if you stick to one herbicide for long enough, you'll get resistance to it, okay? So these guys have had long history of paraquat use for winter cleaning out of their pasture seed crops. This is our normal ryegrass. This is the material that was sent in. That's been treated with 1.6 litres of gramoxone. Okay, it turns out to be very resistant to paraquat. So that's just a message. be careful about sticking to any one herbicide over and over again. And lastly, I just want to show you some photos. This is one of the sites that we went and worked at. This is a centre pivot. And you'll notice that if you actually look out through the pivot, that there's these little clumps of ryegrass there. Those clumps all survived the double knock treatment. That is, they all survived glyphosate, followed 10 days later by 1.5 litres of spray seed. Okay? Killed everything else off, just left that ryegrass. Of course, you can see there's virtually no competition for them, so anything that survives is going to grow on and set seed. And we tested some of that material and it's resistant to both glyphosate and paraquat. Okay. But when we actually started looking at the site, it got even more interesting. This is the edge of the paddock. And so this has all been sprayed down here because that's where the edge of the irrigation line runs, the pivot runs. And so that's all the resistant, glyphosate-resistant ryegrass there. And what this photo here doesn't show is that there's a stock watering point just here. So there's a trough with a watering point, and that's a channel where that water comes from for that watering point. And the only thing growing in that channel is ryegrass, and it's glyphosate resistant. So obviously what's happened here is spraying the channel has led to glyphosate resistant ryegrass, and the seed, because ryegrass seed floats, has come in the water, down the channel, over into the stock watering point, out of the trough, and produced that mat of glyphosate-resistant ryegrass around the trough that has then been carted through the field and treated with paraquat and selected paraquat resistance. So the real message from this whole story is that if something like this happens, just because it happens to be on a fence line or in an irrigation channel, don't think that it's not going to affect you. Because if that moves into the cropped area, then you can come into all sorts of problems, and because ryegrass is an obligate outcrosser, you can get resistance to all sorts of things bundled together into the same ryegrass plant. So we really do need to take notice of what's happening in these areas that we're not actually cropping, and making sure that we're not actually leaving problems for ourselves into the future.